Over the last decade, Hollywood movies have been getting bigger and bigger, and as the budgets for these films have exploded, so have the risks. In this video, I'm going to take a look at the top 20 biggest box office bombs of all time. Now, just to be clear, this isn't a list of the worst films ever made. Some of the movies here are actually really good, but for one reason or another, audiences just didn't show up. I've adjusted both the budgets and box office grosses of these films for inflation so we can get a much more accurate picture of just how hard these movies flopped. In some cases, I couldn't find exact numbers, so I had to estimate based on multiple sources. You might be surprised to learn that even after adjusting for inflation, most of the films on this list are from the last 10 years. I'll talk more about why that is at the end of the video. Starting the list off at number 20 is X-Men Dark Phoenix. I love the X-Men franchise, but it's been extremely inconsistent. I was hyped for the first film, but ultimately found it kind of disappointing. I loved the sequel X2 though. The quality has always been a bit of a roller coaster. The Last Stand was awful, X-Men Origins Wolverine didn't do that much for me either, but the Wolverine and Logan were both excellent. First Class felt fresh, and Days of Future Past was really creative. Then came X-Men Apocalypse, which I didn't care for at all. It got mixed reviews, but still managed to turn a profit. But then came Dark Phoenix. It should have been a hit. The Dark Phoenix arc is one of the most popular storylines in the comics, though parts of it already had been adapted in X2. Released in 2019, Dark Phoenix became the first X-Men movie not to top the box office in its opening weekend. It was the 12th film in the X-Men universe, and by then, audiences were just burned out, especially after the disappointing Apocalypse. Plus, this movie didn't feature Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, arguably the best part of the franchise. Honestly, it felt like the writers had lost interest too. The story was dull, and the film ended up with the worst reviews of any X-Men movie. It's estimated to have lost between 99 and 167 million, and there hasn't been a standard X-Men film since. Number 19 is The Adventures of Pluto Nash. Directed by Ron Underwood, who also made Tremors and City Slickers, this film came out in 2002 with a budget of nearly 100 million. It only grossed about 7. Adjusted for inflation, it cost the studio around 168 million. Eddie Murphy starred in the film and may have been partly to blame for its failure. Several writers were hired to revise the script because Murphy kept rejecting it. He thought the original version was too funny and told the writers to imagine they were writing for a serious star like Harrison Ford or Sylvester Stallone. He wanted a straightforward movie and said he would bring the comedy himself. Before the film was released, a print leaked, and early reactions were so negative that Underwood asked for a delay so he could reshoot some scenes. He later admitted that throughout production he knew the movie just wasn't funny, but didn't know how to fix it. Number 18 is Flushed Away. And honestly, this is the first movie on the list that I thought was actually pretty good. I remembered seeing it when it first came out, and I can understand why it bombed. If you've never heard of it, Flushed Away is about a pampered mouse who gets flushed down the toilet and ends up in an adventure in the sewers. It's a kid's movie, but let's be real, a lot of parents didn't want to take their kids to a movie about pets being flushed down the toilet. That said, if you've never seen it, give it a shot. It was made by Aardman Animations, the geniuses behind Wallace and Gromit and Chicken Run. But unlike those films, which use stop motion, Flushed Away was made with CGI designed to look like stop motion. It was even nominated for several awards, but lost an estimated 170 million. It also had the misfortune of releasing the same day as the Santa Claus 3, which was aimed at the exact audience. Number 17 is Disney's live-action version of Mulan. Since the film was set in China, many expected it to be a guaranteed hit. Even if it didn't perform well in America, it was predicted to do very good in Chinese theaters. But the problem was that it was scheduled to be released on March 27, 2020. And just days before the release, the world shut down due to COVID. This caused Disney to keep pushing the release date back farther and farther until they eventually gave up and released it on Disney+, but for a special fee. At the time, if you wanted to watch Mulan on Disney Plus, you had to pay $29, which was way more than it cost to go to most theaters, and you'd be watching the film at home on a TV instead of a giant screen. The film lost $171 million. Number 16 is another film that was ruined by COVID, Jungle Cruise. Based on the Disney ride, it was expected to be the next Pirates of the Caribbean. Like Mulan, it also ended up releasing on Disney Plus for $29. It lost $174 million and received mixed reviews. I actually liked it. There were parts that bored me, but it reminded me a lot of classic adventure films like The African Queen. The next film on our list is one of the coolest science fiction films of the last 30 years, but unfortunately very few people have seen it. That film is Titan AE, which comes in at number 15. Like Flushed Away, this was an animated film that people just weren't sure what to make of. It seemed like a movie for kids, but it clearly had a more adult audience in mind based on its darker themes. It's set in a future where Earth has been destroyed and follows a man who may know the location of a giant ship that could help save humanity. It's an incredibly beautiful film that incorporates both computer and traditional animation. It was directed by Don Bluth, one of the greatest animation directors of all time. He made An American Tail, The Land Before Time, and All Dogs Go to Heaven. Joss Whedon, who is often credited as one of the masterminds behind the Marvel Cinematic Universe, served as a screenwriter for the film, so there was a lot of talent behind it. When the film premiered, it finished 5th at the weekend box office. One of the main reasons for its failure was that it received very little marketing, largely due to the fact that the studio that produced it, Fox Animation, was facing financial trouble and had closed just 10 days after the film's release. It's estimated the film cost Fox over $180 million. Number 14 is Turning Red, a Pixar film about a teenage girl who turns into a red panda when she gets emotional. I wouldn't say that it's the greatest Pixar film ever made, but come on, this is a studio that made Toy Story and The Incredibles. No matter how weak their films got, they always made tons of money, and most won awards. But like many Disney films released during the pandemic, Turning Red was released directly to streaming instead of in theaters. Disney had firmly planned for a theatrical release, but made the decision to send it to Disney Plus at the last minute when COVID cases began to spike. It was also released around the time of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which caused Disney to pull the film from Russian theaters. It ended up making just under $20 million at the box office and lost about $186 million. Coming in at number 13 is King Arthur: Legend of the Sword. This was an epic adventure film based on the legend of Camelot and the Knights of the Round Table. It's the first film on this list that I've never seen, and I actually completely forgot it even got released. You'd expect a film made by Guy Ritchie to do a lot better. He's made some of the coolest British crime thrillers ever, like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. But the medieval fantasy genre just wasn't popular in 2017, and critics also trashed the film. Believe it or not, there were actually plans for this movie to kick off a 6-film series, but the fact that they thought audiences would want 6 movies like this shows just how out of touch studios have become with the average moviegoer. Number 12 is Tomorrowland, directed by Brad Bird. The film was based on the Disney theme park attraction, and audiences just didn't understand what the movie was even supposed to be about. The concept is actually pretty cool. It's about a futuristic society created in another dimension, inspired by the ideas of inventors like Thomas Edison. It was released on Memorial Day weekend in 2015, which is usually reserved for huge blockbuster films. Tomorrowland just didn't feel like a big blockbuster. It did manage to come in first place that weekend, but its only serious competition was Pitch Perfect 2. Still, the film ended up losing Disney about $199 million. Number 11 is Pan, a film about the original Peter Pan and Captain Hook. It was released in 2015, and just like King Arthur, it came out at a time when this kind of fantasy genre just wasn't popular. It was marketed towards kids and families, but let's be honest, kids these days don't really think Peter Pan is cool. The film received overwhelmingly negative reviews. Everything about it was criticized. The highlight was Hugh Jackman as Blackbeard, but I feel like most people didn't even know Jackman was in the movie. I mean, it's a movie about Peter Pan. Why is Blackbeard even in it? The film was also accused of whitewashing because they cast Rooney Mara as the character Tiger Lily, who was supposed to be Native American. Joe Wright, who directed the film, said he hated it so much he almost considered retiring after it was released. At number 10, it's another Disney movie. This time, Mars Needs Moms, a 2011 animated film about a boy whose mom is abducted by aliens. It was heavily marketed as a 3D movie, which at the time was making a comeback as a popular gimmick. But the visuals were pretty much the only thing this film had going for it. An animated kids movie in 3D about aliens sounds like it should have been a huge hit, but Disney released it the same weekend as Rango, a Western spoof where Johnny Depp voices a lizard. Rango went on to win several awards, while Mars Needs Moms was largely forgotten. Number 9 is Battleship, and boy did they miss the mark with this one. Based very loosely on the board game, Battleship is a sci-fi film about aliens attacking a fleet of naval ships near Hawaii. It has little to do with the actual game. The film received poor reviews and made less money on its opening weekend than the 3D re-release of Titanic, which premiered the same weekend. Strange World is the 8th largest flop in history, but this one's actually kind of good. Strange World is a throwback to old school science fiction adventure stories like Journey to the Center of the Earth, but animated. It was directed by Don Hall, who had just come off the success of Moana. It went on to become one of the most streamed movies on Disney Plus, and honestly, until researching for this video, I didn't even realize it had been released theatrically. I thought it went straight to Disney Plus, but no, it came out in theaters in late 2022. Unfortunately, it was released at the same time as Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and there was also controversy surrounding the character of Ethan, Disney's first openly gay main character. Disney also seemed to have no faith in the film, they barely marketed it, but it's actually worth checking out. Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas comes in at number 7. This film is legendary for all the wrong reasons. It features an incredible cast: Brad Pitt, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Michelle Pfeiffer, but it bombed so hard it nearly bankrupted DreamWorks. Coming off the massive success of Shrek, DreamWorks was looking for a follow-up hit. They hoped Sinbad would be their version of Disney's Aladdin, but they hired John Logan to write it, a brilliant screenwriter who had just written Gladiator. Logan would later go on to write The Aviator and several James Bond films. He's a great writer, but a strange choice for a kids movie. He even admitted that his original script may have been too intense for the intended audience. But the biggest issue was the competition. The film was released during the 4th of July weekend in 2003, the same time as Terminator 3, Pirates of the Caribbean, and Too Fast, Too Furious, and some theaters were still showing Finding Nemo, which had already become a massive hit. Jeffrey Katzenberg, co-founder of DreamWorks Animation, blamed the failure on the lack of CGI. He believed it showed that audiences had lost interest in traditional animation. As a result, all of DreamWorks' future films would be computer animated. Number 6 is Cutthroat Island. This film did so badly that Hollywood didn't release another big-budget pirate film until Pirates of the Caribbean nearly a decade later. Directed by Rennie Harlin and starring his then-wife Gina Davis, the film ran into problems early. Michael Douglas was originally cast but dropped out. When Davis found out, she tried to back out too, but was contractually obligated to stay. Harlan became so obsessed with casting that he ignored set design, only to order several sets torn down and rebuilt later. He demanded constant rewrites, and over a dozen crew members quit during production due to frustration. The budget ballooned so much that Corelco Pictures had to cancel another major project, Crusade, just to keep Cutthroat Island afloat. Harlan even had to pay some production costs out of his own pocket. The film lost $217 million, and Corelco Pictures went out of business. Number 5 is Mortal Engines. Advertised as one of the most visually stunning films of all time, Mortal Engines was produced by Peter Jackson and the team behind The Lord of the Rings. Jackson handpicked Christian Rivers to direct based on his Oscar-winning effects work for King Kong. The film's huge budget wasn't enough to save it. Critics praised the visuals but panned almost everything else. It would go on to lose $219 million. Number 4 on our list is The 13th Warrior. To understand why this one failed, you have to know a bit about Michael Crichton, one of the best-selling authors of all time. Before his literary success, Crichton attended Harvard and initially majored in English. After a disagreement with his professor, he switched his major to medicine, only to leave the profession after publishing several books. He would later create the hit series ER based on his time working in a hospital. In the 1970s, Crichton transitioned into film, writing and directing Westworld, the basis for the later HBO show. In 1976, Crichton published a now mostly forgotten book, Eaters of the Dead, which served as the basis for The 13th Warrior. Originally directed by John McTiernan, a huge action director who had worked on Predator and Die Hard, the film was reworked by Crichton himself, who was unhappy with the initial cut. Reshoots pushed the budget up and delayed the release by a full year. Unfortunately, a Viking-themed action movie just didn't appeal to audiences. Despite the success of Jurassic Park and Jurassic Park: The Lost World, which had been based on Crichton's novels, The 13th Warrior lost around $243 million. Interestingly, The 13th Warrior now has a bit of a cult following, with many calling it underrated. 2023's The Marvels is the most recent entry on this list. Coming in at number 3, The Marvels is part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, a sequel to Captain Marvel and a continuation of the Disney Plus series Ms. Marvel. Throughout the 2010s, superhero movies were box office gold, but by 2023, audiences were burnt out. Marvel went from releasing 1 or 2 films a year to flooding the market with 3 or 4 movies annually, along with several streaming series. Audiences became overwhelmed and started tuning out. The Marvels became the lowest grossing film in the MCU, raising serious questions about the direction of this cinematic universe. Number 2 on our list is The Lone Ranger, starring Johnny Depp and Armie Hammer. This 2013 film should have been a hit. Depp was riding high on the success of the Pirates of the Caribbean, and the film was directed by Gore Verbinski and produced by Jerry Bruckheimer, the same team behind that franchise. But reviews were poor and the film bombed, losing $256 million. Westerns just weren't in demand, and even Johnny Depp couldn't draw crowds. Also, I always thought it was interesting that Johnny Depp didn't actually play the Lone Ranger, he played Tonto, the sidekick. And at number 1, the biggest box office flop of all time, adjusted for inflation, is John Carter, which was based on a story by Tarzan creator Edgar Rice Burroughs. Disney had been trying to make it since the 1980s. It was supposed to launch a trilogy but performed so badly that the sequels were scrapped. The problem? Too much money invested from the start. The film had a massive budget, and even after filming began, there were constant arguments about the script. A total of 18 scenes had to be reshot. Then came what some call the worst marketing campaign ever. The ad agency Disney hired had no experience with movie marketing. For example, they used Led Zeppelin's Kashmir in a Super Bowl ad for the film, but the target audience was kids, which would have most likely been unfamiliar with the band. Disney also seemed to give up on the film early, moving its release date and shifting focus elsewhere. They didn't even promote it on the Disney Channel like they usually do. Some speculate that Disney sabotaged the film on purpose since they were in the process of buying Star Wars and didn't want another competing sci-fi franchise. Strangely enough, the film was a hit in Russia, but not nearly enough to make a difference. In the end, John Carter lost Disney $274 million, and Disney seems to have taken the brunt of these failures. Of the 20 biggest flops of all time, at least half were produced or distributed by Disney or a Disney-owned studio. After John Carter, Disney shifted gears, focusing less on risky new projects and more on sequels, remakes, and established franchises. But even that strategy seems to be catching up with them. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, even after adjusting for inflation, most of the biggest box office flops came out in the last 10 years. It's easy to blame the pandemic, and yes, movies like Turning Red and Jungle Cruise were definitely impacted by COVID, But even before and after those years, plenty of big budget films underperformed. So why are so many major movies flopping these days? There's two big reasons. First, streaming. Going to the movies has become expensive. By the time a family of 4 buys tickets, popcorn, and drinks, they could easily be spending $100. As a result, many families are opting to stay home for movie nights, and with studios releasing films on streaming platforms faster than ever, a lot of people figure they can just wait a few weeks to watch the latest Marvel movie on Disney+. That brings us to the second reason, Marvel itself. The Marvel Cinematic Universe changed Hollywood. It made shared universes and massive blockbusters the industry standard. Other studios tried to replicate that success, but not all of them pulled it off. To compete, studios started pouring more and more money into their films, more special effects, bigger casts, more spectacle. But the more they spend, the bigger the risk. It used to be that a big action-packed blockbuster was a guaranteed success, a major event. Now, these kinds of movies are released every week. They're no longer special, and audiences have become much more selective about what they're willing to see in theaters. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing, and let me know in the comments if you've seen any of these films and if you recommend any of them. As always, thank you for watching.